When Rosa opened the door of that rusted-out trailer with 7 soaked children clinging to her skirt, she expected to find mold, rust, maybe even dead rats. What she didn't expect was the scent. Fresh roses. Impossible. It was September in the New Mexico desert, and there wasn't a single rose bush for miles. But there it was, sweet, strong, alive. And then she saw it. In the back of that tiny space on a makeshift shelf, an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe glowed softly in the stormlight. The 7 children stopped crying instantly. Lucia, the youngest at only 2, held out her little hands, and next to the image, a yellowed note in old-fashioned script, "For the mother who will come with her 7 treasures." A wedding photo in a broken frame. It was everything Rosa Herrera, a 38-year-old widow with 7 children, owned in the world. The neighbors watched from their windows, poor Mexicans just like her, but no one offered to help. Everyone knew the Great Depression had no mercy, especially with Mexicans. Rosa counted the money for the 5th time. $80, 4 $20 bills. It was the ridiculous settlement the railroad company paid for Antonio's death 3 years ago, and now it was all that stood between her children and the street. Rosa clutched the wooden rosary her grandmother gave her on her deathbed in 1915. The time-worn beads seemed to pulse in her hand. "My daughter, when all seems lost, Our Lady will show you the way," the old woman had whispered with her last breath. But now, 16 years later, with 7 hungry mouths and the rain starting to fall, those words felt empty, cruel even. Would the Virgin really help an evicted widow? Or was her grandmother wrong and God had forgotten women like her? But before we continue, here comes the important part. In the comments below, tell me, what country are you watching from? What city? What state? I want to know how far these stories are reaching. I want to know about the community that's growing here with us. Now come with me. The story is just beginning. Rosa Herrera was 38 years old, but her hands told the story of a lifetime of work. Calloused, cracked at the knuckles, stained from harsh soap from washing the rich folks' laundry, black hair, already flecked with premature white strands, was pulled into a tight bun that tugged at her scalp. Deep dark circles were carved under her eyes by 3 years, without a full night's sleep, not since Antonio died, crushed between 2 train cars in 1928. Her faded blue dress was the only one she owned, mended so many times the patches had patches. The brown shawl covering her shoulders was frayed at the edges, and her shoes, God, her shoes. The soles were so full of holes she could feel every rock on the sidewalk through the worn-out leather. It was 6:23 in the morning on that Tuesday, September 15th, 1931. Rosa counted the money one more time, though the number wouldn't change. $80, 4 $20 bills tucked into a small cloth pouch tied at her waist, hidden beneath her dress. It was the settlement the damned railroad company had paid for Antonio's life, as if a man's life, a father of 7, was worth only $80. For the last 3 years, Rosa had spent almost all of it on rent, $12 a month for that single rat-infested room, $5 a week on food when she could manage, medicine when the children got sick, which was often. She worked as a laundress for 6 Anglo families in the rich part of town, $2 a week for ruined hands and a broken back. Maria, her eldest daughter at only 14, worked 12 hours a day at the textile mill, $3 a week that cost the girl her childhood, $5 a week total for 8 mouths, 62 cents per person per day. The math was cruel and simple. It was impossible. In her other hand, Rosa held the dark wooden rosary her grandmother Guadalupe had given her 16 years ago. Each bead was smooth from being prayed over, by her great-grandmother during some war Rosa didn't even know, by her grandmother when she lost 3 children to diphtheria, by Rosa herself on 1,000 nights of despair. She still remembered that day in 1915 as if it were yesterday. She was 22, about to marry Antonio the following week, and her grandmother was dying of tuberculosis in that stinking charity hospital bed. The old woman had gripped Rosa's hands with surprising strength for someone so close to death, and whispered in a hoarse voice, "My daughter, this rosary is 100 years old. Your great-grandmother prayed it during the war. I prayed it when I lost 3 children and thought I couldn't go on living. When all seems lost, when you feel there is no way out, pray with it. Our Lady will show you the way. She never abandons her daughters." Rosa had treasured those words for 16 years. But now, sitting on that sidewalk with 7 crying children around her and the rain starting to fall from the grey sky, her grandmother's words felt not just empty, they felt cruel. Where was the Virgin now? Where was the path she had promised to show? The bailiff returned half an hour later. His face was hard, but Rosa saw the exhaustion in his eyes. How many evictions had he done that week, that month? Since the Depression began in 1929, this is what he did. Tore families from their homes. "Senora Herrera, you have until noon to get off the sidewalk. After that, I'm calling the police." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked away. It was 6:23 in the morning. Rosa had 5 hours and 37 minutes before she would be treated like a criminal. The neighbors kept watching from their windows, women with scarves on their heads, unemployed men, curious children. But no one, absolutely no one, opened their door to offer even a glass of water. Everyone knew it could happen to them too. The Great Depression had no mercy, and having brown skin and a Spanish surname made everything worse. The eviction had begun at exactly 6 in the morning, while Rosa was still getting the children dressed in the darkness of the one room they called home. 3 sharp knocks on the door. Rosa opened it with Lucia, 2 years old, on her hip. The girl had a fever the night before and was still too warm. The bailiff, a tall man with a greying moustache and an impeccable uniform, held out an official paper with the bank's seal. "Senora Rosa Herrera." She nodded, unable to speak. He handed her the document. "Eviction order for non-payment. 3 months' rent overdue. You have 1 hour to remove your belongings." Rosa tried. "But sir, I have 7 children." Her voice came out weak, pleading, and she hated the sound of it. The officer wasn't cruel, just tired, exhausted. "1 hour, senora." "I'm sorry." He wasn't a bad man. He'd been doing 12 evictions a week since 1929. It had just become another job, another family destroyed among dozens. Rosa went back into the room. The children were still scattered on the floor. They had no beds, sleeping on old blankets over the wooden planks. Maria woke up first. At 14, she had already learned to read her mother's face. She saw the red, swollen eyes, the slumped shoulders, and understood immediately. She didn't ask. She just got up and began to wake her siblings in silence. Jose, 12, Carmen, 10, Miguel, 8, Ana, 6, Diego, 4, Lucia, 2. "Get up, kids. We have to go," Maria whispered, her voice too firm for a 14-year-old girl. Diego started to cry. Carmen hugged him. Jose clenched his fists and looked at the floor, swallowing the anger that had nowhere to go. At 6:45, they began putting their things on the sidewalk. It wasn't much. 2 old dented aluminum pots, 6 cheap china plates, 2 cracked, 1 broken in half but still used, 8 torn blankets that smelled of mildew, a wedding photo in a broken frame where Antonio smiled in his railroad uniform, clothes in a burlap sack that no longer closed, the small image of St. Joseph that had hung on the wall. Everything fit in 3 trips. Rosa carried the pots. Maria and Jose carried the blankets. Carmen, Miguel, and Ana carried the clothes and plates. Diego held the photo as if it were a treasure, staring at the face of the father he barely remembered. Lucia cried in Maria's arms. The next-door neighbor, Senora Dominguez, a heavy woman of about 50, always with a black scarf on her head, came out on her porch at 7:15. Rosa felt the stare before she heard the voice. "Rosa, did you really not pay the rent?" The tone wasn't concern. It was morbid curiosity. Rosa didn't look up. "I tried, Senora. Maria and I worked, but it wasn't enough." Senora Dominguez crossed her arms. "I told you to find a new husband. A widow with 7 children can't survive alone. Too much pride?" Rosa bit her tongue. She wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Senora, please, don't come asking for help here, Rosa. I have 5 mouths to feed. Everyone has their own problems." And she went back inside, slamming the door. Rosa lowered her head. The children had heard everything. Jose clenched his fists again, nails digging into his palms. Miguel began to cry silently, tears streaming down without a sound. Lucia didn't understand the words, but she felt the tension in the air and whimpered, clinging to Maria's body. At 7:15, it began to rain. A fine but cold rain, typical of September in the New Mexico mountains. Rosa covered the children with the blankets, which immediately began to soak through. They sat on the sidewalk, leaning against the wall of the house that was no longer theirs. People passed by on their way to work, the few who still had jobs. They looked, some with pity, others in too much of a hurry to care. None of them stopped. Padre Miguel from the Mexican Catholic Church passed by at 8 in the morning. He stopped his old black Ford. He got out. Rosa felt shame burn her cheeks. "Rosa, my daughter, what happened?" His voice was kind, but Rosa heard the exhaustion in it too. "The bank, Padre. I couldn't pay." He sighed deeply, and the sound carried the weight of 40 families evicted that year alone. The church tried to help. God knows it tried, but there were so many. "Wait here. I'll see if I can get something." He returned 30 minutes later. His heavy face said everything before the words did. "Rosa, I'm sorry. The church is out of funds. We get 50 families a week asking for help. We have no space and no money, but—" He reached into the pocket of his cassock and pulled out 5 crumpled dollars. "It's all I have in my pocket today." Rosa wanted to refuse, but Maria nudged her. She took the money. "Thank you, Padre. God repay you." He made the sign of the cross over the 7 children, murmured a blessing that was lost in the wind, and drove away. Rosa looked at the $5. Now she had 85. But what was a woman to do with $85 and 7 children in the rain? At 10 in the morning, Rosa made a decision. She couldn't stay on the sidewalk until noon, waiting for the police to treat her like a criminal in front of her children. She needed shelter, any shelter. She had heard whispers among laundresses, conversations in the bread line, of a place on the outskirts of the city where desperate families set up shacks and abandoned trailers. Tin Town, they called it. Tin Town. It was far, 5 miles on foot down a dirt road, but it was the only option left. "Get up, children. We're going to walk." The children looked at her with huge, frightened eyes. "Where to, Mama?" asked Carmen with her thin 10-year-old voice. Rosa forced a smile that hurt the muscles in her face. "To a new place. A better place." The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. They picked up what they could carry. Rosa with Lucia tied to her back in a shawl and a heavy bag in her hand. Maria with another bag full of clothes. Jose and Miguel carrying the soaking wet blankets on their backs. Carmen, Ana, and Diego with the pots and plates wrapped in cloths. They looked like war refugees walking down Main Street as the fine rain continued to fall. Some people watched from their windows. No one opened a door. They walked in the rain for 2 hours that felt like 2 days. The dirt road turned to thick mud that clung to their shoes. Rosa's shoes went squish, squish, squish with every step, and the cold water seeped in through the holed soles, soaking her torn socks. The children's feet were covered in mud up to their ankles. 3 of them didn't even have shoes and walked barefoot, their small feet sinking into the wet earth. The cold climbed up their legs, seeped into their bones. Lucia cried on her back, too hot from the fever, too wet from the rain. Diego, 4 years old, started asking to be carried too, but Rosa couldn't carry two. Maria, blessed Maria, took Diego on her back, even with the bag in her hand. The girl staggered, but didn't complain. The smell of wet earth mixed with the smoke from the city's chimneys fading behind them. A heavy silence hung between them, only the sound of the rain hitting the ground, of footsteps sinking into the mud, and Lucia's intermittent crying. Rosa prayed the rosary mentally, passing bead by bead between her fingers inside her pocket, but the words came out mechanical, hollow, faithless. Hail Mary, full of grace. But where was the grace? The Lord is with thee. But she only felt loneliness. Blessed art thou among women. But she felt cursed. At 12:30 they arrived. Tin Town was exactly what the name promised. Dozens of shacks made of old, slanted planks, rusted-out trailers without wheels, tents of torn canvas tied to crooked stakes. Grey smoke rose from makeshift bonfires. Dirty children in patched clothes played in the mud as if it were normal. Thin women washed clothes in tin buckets. Men sat in broken chairs, smoking and staring into the void. There was no work. There was no hope. There was only waiting. But beyond the misery, beyond the despair visible on every face, there was something else. The valley. In the background, red and gold mountains rose against the sky. Immense, infinite, silence. There were no noisy factories, honking cars, shouting crowds. Just the wind singing between the rocks and birds calling to one another. Rosa stopped in the middle of the muddy road and looked. It was the most beautiful valley she had ever seen in her life. Strange to feel beauty in the midst of so much despair. But there it was, proof that God still created beautiful things, even when he allowed his children to suffer. Rosa walked between the shacks, carrying Lucia, who had finally stopped crying and was sleeping feverishly against her shoulder. She was looking for someone who could point her to a place, any place. An old man sitting in a broken chair under the protection of a torn canvas tarp was smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. His eyes were deep as wells. "Senor, excuse me. Is there any place where I can stay with my children?" Her voice came out more desperate than she wanted. He pointed with a crooked, age-stained finger toward the end of the mud street. "Over there. Green trailer. The owner died last week. His son is selling it for $80. It's garbage, but it's all there is." $80. Exactly what she had in the pouch tied to her waist. Coincidence? A sign? A curse? Rosa didn't know anymore. She walked over with the children following in a silent line behind her. The trailer was exactly what the old man had said. Garbage. Junk. Peeling green paint revealed rusted metal underneath. Wheels buried in the mud. No chance of ever moving again. A crooked door hung on broken hinges. A cracked window. Horrible. But it was shelter. It was a roof. It was something. The owner's son, a thin man in his 40s with hard eyes and an unshaven face, was waiting beside it, smoking. He didn't say hello, didn't ask anything, just $80, cash. Rosa took the 4 $20 bills from her pouch. She felt each bill leave her as if tearing off a piece of her soul. She handed them over. He counted them, put them in his pocket, pulled a rusty key from his own, and threw it into her hand. "The lock doesn't work anyway," he said, and walked away without looking back. Rosa stood in front of that horrible trailer with 7 soaked children surrounding her. Maria tried to smile. Jose stared at the ground. Lucia slept. Diego whimpered. Carmen held Anna's hand, who was shaking from the cold. Miguel hugged the wet blankets. Rosa took a deep breath. "This is our new home." The words came out strange. Hogar. Home. Was this home? She gripped the rusty doorknob, felt the cold, rough metal against her palm, turned it and pushed. The door groaned loudly, and everything changed. Rosa opened the door, expecting the worst. She expected the smell of suffocating mold, rust eating the walls, maybe a dead rat rotting in a corner. She expected darkness, filth, physical despair. But that's not what she found. The first scent that hit her nostrils was roses. Fresh roses. Sweet, alive, impossible. It was September in the New Mexico desert. There were no rose bushes growing anywhere for miles. She knew she had walked for miles and hadn't seen a single flower, but the scent was there, real, undeniable. The children smelled it too. Diego stopped whimpering. "Mama, it smells nice," he whispered, admiration in his voice. They entered slowly, one by one. The trailer was tiny. Rosa estimated no more than 10 feet long by 6 feet wide, barely big enough for a family of 8. The floor was rotten wood, with loose planks that creaked with every step, rusted metal walls with fist-sized holes let in the cold air. In the left corner, a small, useless sink with no faucet, a low metal ceiling with rust stains. A broken window let the rain drip in with a rhythmic patter, but in the right corner there was something covered by an old shabby cloth. And the smell. The scent of roses grew stronger the closer they got to that corner. It was coming from there, from that cloth, from whatever was hidden underneath. Rosa gently placed Lucia on the floor. The girl continued to sleep, finally resting. The other children came in slowly, as if entering a church and not an abandoned trailer. Silence. Even Diego was quiet. Just the sound of the rain hitting the metal roof. Plink, plink, plink. Rosa walked to the right corner, hands shaking, heart pounding. What was under that old cloth? Before touching the fabric, Rosa looked around for explanations. The door had been locked from the outside when they arrived. The man who sold it had to unlock it with the key. She was sure of it. She had seen him. There was no other entrance. The window was too small for an adult to pass through, and it was 6 feet off the ground from the outside. You'd need a ladder. No one had been in here for days, maybe weeks. The man said the owner had died last week. So how was there this smell of fresh roses, freshly cut flowers? And how was the inside relatively clean? There was dirt, yes, dust, but not that thick layer of abandonment from months, especially in that corner where the cloth was. It was as if someone had taken care of that specific space while letting the rest rot. Rosa swallowed hard. She reached out her hand. Fingers touched the rough fabric. She pulled, and she gasped, loudly. An image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. It wasn't small like the ones the priest sold at the church. It was large, Rosa estimated about 16 inches high, painted on solid, heavy wood. But the painting, Dios mio, the painting looked new, as if just finished. Vibrant colors that shined even in the dim light of the trailer, deep turquoise blue of the mantle, glistening gold of the stars, roses at her feet in shades of pink and red. The serene face of Our Lady looking down, hands clasped in prayer. Surrounded by golden rays like the sun, every detail perfect, every line precise. Rosa fell to her knees. She didn't decide to fall. Her legs simply gave out. The children came running, stepping on the planks that creaked loudly. Maria put her hand to her mouth. Jose made the sign of the cross automatically, as Padre Miguel had taught him. Carmen started to cry, but not from sadness, not from fear, from something that had no name, something that gave her goosebumps and warmed her chest at the same time. The image was resting on a crude wooden shelf nailed to the wall. Clean. Not a single particle of dust, as if it had been placed there that very morning by careful hands. Around it, arranged in a perfect semicircle, 7 smooth white stones. Rosa counted automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 stones, 7 children. Coincidence? Impossible. But how? Who? And underneath the image, held by one of the small stones, was a paper, yellowed with age, folded carefully. Rosa picked it up with hands that trembled so much she almost dropped it. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was old, flowery, done in black ink that had faded to brown, but still legible, perfectly legible. What does it mean? Rosa shook her head. She didn't know, she didn't understand, but she felt, oh, how she felt, Something enormous happening. Rosa couldn't stop looking at the image. The colors were too vivid, too bright, impossible. She gently ran a finger over the blue mantle, expecting to find wet paint that would stain her skin. But it was dry, old even to the touch, but impossibly preserved in an abandoned trailer in the desert for God knows how long. She observed the meticulous details. She counted the stars on the mantle, 46 perfect golden stars, the angel at the Virgin's feet with open wings, the sun behind her emanating rays, the roses, Castilian roses, like the ones her grandmother used to grow in the yard in Chihuahua before coming to the United States. The expression on the Virgin's face was neither happy nor sad. It was serene, absolute peace, like a mother waiting for her child to come home, knowing he will arrive. And on the wooden base, carved by hand in deep letters, was an inscription. Rosa was her grandmother's refuge, and now was it all connected? The rosary, the words on her deathbed, this image, this inscription, or was her desperate mind seeing patterns where none existed? Rosa began to cry, not tears of despair like she had cried on the sidewalk that morning. These were tears of confusion, relief, fear, hope, all mixed into an emotion that had no name. Maria knelt beside her mother and hugged her. Jose hugged them both. Soon all 7 children were huddled around Rosa, hugging, crying, and laughing at the same time, without understanding why. Lucia woke up, saw everyone hugging, and smiled. The first time all day. Diego touched the image with a small, mud-caked finger. "Mama, the lady is pretty." Anna touched it too. "She's warm, like a living body, like skin." Rosa pulled her grandmother's wooden rosary from her pocket. She held it tight in her left hand, the beads pressing into her palm. With her right hand, she touched the image of the Virgin. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since the eviction, for the first time since Antonio's death 3 years ago, for the first time since despair became her only companion, Rosa felt something different, a presence. Someone was there, not physically, but there, real, caring, waiting, protecting, loving. "Thank you," she whispered to the image, to the Virgin, to God, to whoever was listening. "Thank you, Virgencita. I don't know what's happening, but thank you." The water was cold and clean. She wet the least torn cloth she had, a piece of an old dress she used as a rag, and began to gently clean the wooden frame. The image itself didn't need it. It was perfect, untouched, but the frame had dust in the corners. Rosa cleaned it with reverence, as if touching something alive. As she cleaned, she noticed details she hadn't seen before. Tiny carvings in the frame, little flowers. No, roses. 12 small roses carved into the wooden border with delicate precision. Rosa counted twice to be sure. 12, the number of the apostles, the number of the tribes of Israel, the number of completeness in the Bible. Another sign? Or was she seeing signs where none existed? And on the back of the frame, when she turned it carefully to clean all sides, she discovered something burned into the wood like a brand. The image was 33 years old, exactly 33, the age of Christ when he died on the cross. Another coincidence? How many coincidences did it take before they stopped being coincidences? Rosa dried the frame with another cloth. The image seemed to shine brighter, or was it her tear-filled eyes creating the effect? She didn't know anymore. She placed the image back on the shelf carefully. "Maria," she called, "bring that wooden crate we saw outside." She took the image from the shelf and was surprised by the weight. It was heavier than she expected for its size. Solid wood, dense, real. She placed it in the center of the crate, covered by the shawl. Perfect. The image was at the right height. The children gathered around, forming a semicircle. "Flowers," Rosa said suddenly. "We need flowers for Our Lady." Carmen looked out the window at the rain. "But, Mama, it's raining. There are no flowers here." "There's nothing." Rosa looked around the empty trailer. Then go find anything beautiful. Smooth stones, leaves, twigs, anything we can offer. Diego brought 3 perfectly smooth white stones he found near a creek. Ana brought dry twigs, but with interesting shapes, twisted like natural sculptures. Miguel found a turquoise blue bird feather, intact. Carmen found a piece of clear glass, polished by time, that shone like crystal. José had green leaves from a desert shrub that was still resisting. Rosa took each offering with reverence and arranged them around the image, the white stones in front, the twigs on the sides like a natural frame, the blue feather resting delicately, the glass reflecting the light, the green leaves bringing life. It was beautiful. It wasn't a church altar with expensive candles and imported flowers. It was a poor altar, but it was made with love, with everything they had, and Rosa was sure, absolutely sure, that the Virgin accepted it. In her pocket, Rosa touched the $5 Padre Miguel had given her, $5 that could buy food. But she looked at the image, at the note. For the mother who will come with her 7 treasures, Our Lady has prepared this refuge. If the Virgin had prepared this, if she was really taking care of them, Rosa took the 5 crumpled bills and placed them at the foot of the image, an offering, everything they had besides the pots and wet blankets. For you, Virgencita, you brought us here. This is yours. Rosa began with a trembling voice, Holy Mary, Mother of God. The children responded in chorus. Even the little ones knew it by heart. Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. I don't know if this note is a sign from you or a cruel coincidence, but I am broken. My children are hungry and cold. I'm afraid I can't take care of them. I don't know what to do tomorrow, or the day after, or next month. Just the rain hitting the metal roof. Plink, 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 constant, infinite. Then Maria, with her 14-year-old voice, already aged too much by poverty and responsibility, said something Rosa didn't expect. And thank you, Virgencita, for this roof over our heads, for this beautiful image, for being with us when no one else is. She had only complained, but her daughter, even hungry, even cold, even having lost everything, gave thanks first. What kind of mother was she, that her daughter had more faith? They prayed an Our Father, a Hail Mary, another Our Father. Rosa lost count. The words flowed, and this time they weren't mechanical. They came from the heart, from the depths of her soul. When they finished, it was almost 3 in the afternoon. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained grey, dark. Rosa had 1 candle, the only one she had brought in the bag. She lit it with her last 3 matches. 2 went out before she succeeded, and placed it next to the image. The small but steady flame illuminated the Virgin's face. Let's try to rest, Rosa said. Tomorrow we'll think about what to do. They arranged the blankets on the floor. 8 people in a 10 by 6 foot space. Impossible for everyone to fit comfortably, but they squeezed together, bodies against bodies, shared body heat. Lucia in the middle to stay warmest. Older children at the ends, Rosa near the altar watching the candle burn. At 6 in the evening, it was completely dark. Rosa blew out the candle to save it. She would need it in the coming days. She had no money to buy more. The flame went out with a puff. A wisp of smoke rose. Total darkness filled the trailer. Just the sound of 8 breaths. Rosa closed her eyes. She slept from sheer exhaustion. At 3 in the morning, Rosa woke up. She didn't know why. Heart pounding, like when she had babies and would wake up seconds before they cried. Mother's instinct. She sensed something was different. She opened her eyes slowly and froze. The candle. The candle was lit, a steady flame illuminating the serene face of the Virgin, glowing in the dark. Impossible. Rosa sat up slowly so as not to wake the children. She looked around. All fast asleep. No one had moved. She would have known. She was in the middle of them all. She was absolutely certain she had blown out the candle at 6 in the evening. She had seen the flame go out. She had seen the wisp of smoke. It had gone completely dark, But now, 9 hours later, at 3 in the morning, it was lit, burning, as if someone had just lit it. She looked for the matches. They were in the bag near her. No one had touched them. She counted. 1 match left. She had used 2 to light it at 3 in the afternoon. There was still 1 left. No one had used it. Besides, none of the children would know how to light a match in complete darkness without making noise, without waking her. She crawled across the cold floor to the candle. She touched the melted wax around it. It was warm, soft, freshly melted. But the candle was the same size as when she had lit it at 3 in the afternoon. It hadn't gotten smaller. 9 hours of burning should have consumed half of it. But it was whole. Rosa looked at the image of the Virgin, illuminated by the impossible flame, and she swore on her grandmother's soul that she saw the Virgin's lips curve into an almost imperceptible smile. "Was it you?" Rosa whispered to the image. "Did you light the candle?" "It was I." Maybe in the dark she had misjudged. Maybe... But no, she knew, she was sure. Something impossible was happening. She tried to make breakfast, but there was no food, nothing. Just rainwater she collected in the pots. The children woke up one by one. They looked at her with hopeful eyes, expecting bread, milk, anything. Rosa felt a dagger twist in her chest. "Mama, I'm hungry," said 6-year-old Anna in her tiny voice. Rosa knelt and hugged the girl. "I know, mija. Just wait a little bit." But wait for what? She had nothing. The $5 from Padre Miguel were at the Virgin's feet, offered. She couldn't take it back. It would be sacrilege, stealing from God. Or could she? Rosa looked at the image, at the 5 bills at its feet, at her 7 children with empty bellies. Maria wasn't complaining, but Rosa saw the hunger in the girl's eyes. Jose was pale. Diego was whimpering. What kind of mother let her children starve for religious pride? "Forgive me, Virgencita," Rosa whispered, "but my children are hungry. I need—" She reached out a trembling hand to take the money back, and she saw it. Among the $5 bills, something else. Something that was definitely not there yesterday. Small, round, shiny. Rosa picked it up with trembling fingers. 7 silver coins. Old, Mexican. She turned one over and read the date, 1910, 21 years ago. Each coin was worth $50 in exchange. 7 coins, $3.50. But no one had put them there. Rosa was sure, absolutely sure. Last night, when she placed the $5 at the foot of the image, it was just the 5 bills. She saw it, touched them, checked. There were no coins. "Where?" she whispered, turning the coins in her hands. Maria came to see. She picked up a coin, turned it in the morning light coming through the window. She read the engraved inscription. Did she still doubt? Yes. Part of her, the rational part, the part that had lived 38 years in a world where miracles didn't happen, doubted. But the children were hungry, and the coins were in her hand, real, solid. She would think about the implications later. Rosa returned from town at dusk, her bag full of bread, beans, rice, and a little milk. She spent $4. $4.50 remained. The children ate like they hadn't eaten in a week. Rosa cried, watching them eat with such hunger and joy, every crumb devoured as if it were a king's feast. How had they come to this? A woman who had once been the mistress of a dignified home, now praying for miracles in an abandoned trailer. At night, after cleaning everything, Rosa rearranged the makeshift altar with the few beautiful things they had. White stones, the blue feather, the green leaf, the polished glass, and the dry twigs. The remaining notes, $4.50, she placed back at the Virgin's feet as an offering of gratitude and trust. For you, Virgencita, you gave this to us. I give it back to you. She lit the candle with the last remaining match. The flame held steady, radiating light onto the Virgin's serene face. They prayed a full rosary together, all 8 kneeling on the floor, their low voices filling the small trailer space with peace. Afterward, they lay down in a pile, the flame still burning. In the middle of the night, Rosa couldn't say the time, but it was absolutely silent, and the cold was more intense. Something strange happened. First, a bluish light filled the trailer coming from outside. It wasn't from the candle, that was still lit and small, yellow-toned. Rosa got up slowly, without waking the children, and went to the broken window, feeling her heart beat like a drum in her chest. Outside, on the ground that was previously just dry earth and stones, there was a silvery blue glow, as if the moon itself had descended to earth. A luminous mist covered the ground, and in the center of the glow, something was growing. Green stems broke the earth, sprouting rapidly before her very eyes. Buds opened as if by magic. Rosa held her breath. They were rose bushes. 3 whole rose bushes grew there in less than a minute. Red buds, shiny leaves, sturdy branches. The flowers opened in a silent spectacle, perfuming everything. It was September, an arid region, impossible for roses to be there. But there they were, beautiful, fresh, alive. Maria woke up. She saw the glow, stood next to her mother, and also held her breath. "Mama, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" "Yes, daughter. I see it." The light faded until it disappeared. Only the rose bushes remained, swaying in the cold night wind. Inside the trailer, the perfume was intoxicating. In the morning, Rosa picked 1 rose and placed it at the Virgin's feet. She gave thanks aloud with tears of emotion. This time, no part of her doubted. It was a miracle. And now Maria knew it too. 4 days passed since the miracle of the rose bushes, and the flowers had not wilted. The perfume was constant and soft, a balm for everyone who entered. Then came the final proof. On Monday, September 21st, a woman appeared. She knocked on the trailer door just after lunch. Rosa answered, surprised. She was Anglo, tall, with elegant clothes and a tired look. "Are you Rosa Herrera?" Rosa hesitated. "I am, Senora. May I come in?" Her voice was trembling. Rosa made room. The woman saw the altar, the image, the fresh roses. She turned pale, a hand covering her chest. "It's her," she said softly. "The Virgin. I dreamed 3 nights in a row of a woman in blue who told me to look for the Mexican widow in the green trailer. She said I needed to pray with you." Rosa felt a deep chill. "You saw this image?" "Yes, exactly like it. The mantle, the flowers. I can't take it anymore. Help me, please." Rosa knelt beside her, held her hands, invited Maria and Jose to join the circle. The children knelt too, touching shoulders and arms in a network of support. They began a full rosary. Elizabeth cried, first in despair, then in relief. When they finished, Elizabeth's face looked different, luminous, light. "I feel peace, for the first time in years." She said goodbye, promising to return. She turned to Rosa and, emotional, took her hands. "The Virgin is here, I am sure of it." She left, trembling but with hope. Rosa looked at Maria. They both knew. This was no longer their secret. God had led others to that door. It was September 24th, 1931. 10 days had passed since the eviction and the discovery of the trailer with the Virgin's image. The money had run out. The 8 of them had eaten the last piece of bread 2 nights before. There were no mysterious coins. The rose bushes continued to bloom, but that hardly mattered when their stomachs screamed with emptiness. Rosa went to town every day hoping for work, but she heard the same refrains over and over. "We don't hire Mexicans." 5 doors were shut in her face. Maria lost her job at the factory due to downsizing. Misery was pushing them into the abyss. The children cried day and night, empty bellies and forgotten dreams. Rosa gave them only rainwater, the only thing she could. At night she sat before the image, with tears and fear. She lied to the children, "Tomorrow everything will be better." But tomorrow seemed like an infinite nightmare. That night, when the children finally fell asleep from exhaustion, Rosa stayed awake before the makeshift altar. The miraculous candle still burned firm, unwavering, but the fire inside her heart was going out. She looked at the image of the Virgin, which seemed safe and distant, like a motionless painting. For the first time, doubt exploded, not an impersonal doubt, but a desperate question. Rosa screamed at the ceiling, at the silence, at God, at anyone who could hear. Rosa fell to her knees, sobbing until she was tired, collapsing on that cold floor, in a stupor between despair and abandonment. Hands trembling, body exhausted. I can't take it anymore, I can't. I'm weak. I'm a terrible mother. I should have done something different. The cry stopped, and nothing was left but total exhaustion. She knew this was the end of what remained of her hope, the end of faith, the end of strength. She fell asleep right there on the floor, surrendered, broken. At 3 in the morning on September 25th, Rosa was sleeping on the floor where she had fallen. The children, scattered on the blankets, breathed silently. Suddenly she woke up for no apparent reason. She had heard a mute, internal call, a feeling of peace mixed with anxiety. She felt as if her very soul were being touched by a warm, invisible presence, and her heart sped up, not with fear, but with hope. Opening her eyes slowly, she saw a soft blue light pulsing on the makeshift altar. It wasn't the light from the candle, which was steady and yellow, but an internal, living light, emanating from the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The turquoise mantle seemed to glow with golden threads. The stars twinkled with a real, almost mesmerizing brilliance. The roses at her feet seemed to move slowly, as if breathing. The Virgin's face, her living eyes of absolute compassion, looked directly at Rosa. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Clear tears streamed down her suffering face, but not from sadness, from awe and veneration. She felt in her chest invisible hands welcoming her with warmth and affection, exactly as if the mother she had lost still held her tight in childhood. A perfume of roses and heavenly incense flooded the space, comforting her cold body. Then she heard a sweet, firm voice within her soul. I brought you here, I prepared this place for you, for your 7 treasures. And because of that you know what it is to need mercy. They prayed that when your time of suffering came, I would be with you, and I am. That I love. Rosa felt as if Antonia were there, giving her invisible strength. But I did not come only to save you, Rosa. I came to use your hands. Those are the hands I want. But in my kingdom, it is a palace. This will be a refuge of the afflicted, as the inscription I left for you says. Rosa answered and froze when she saw Señora Dominguez, the neighbor who had laughed at her during the eviction, who had refused her help, who had shut the door in her face. But now the woman was pale, thin, weak. Rosa, please. Her voice trembled. I'm sick. The doctor says it's cancer. I have no money and no hope. Tears streamed down. I dreamed of the Virgin. She told me to find you, to ask for forgiveness and prayer. She could have said, everyone has their own problems, just as the neighbor had, but she didn't. Come in, Señora. In the end, the woman opened her eyes, dazzled. I have never felt such peace. Rosa, while organizing the altar, noticed a detail that connected everything. The rosary inherited from her grandmother was identical to the one on the discovered image, hanging delicately from the wooden Virgin's neck. My grandmother knew, she thought. She always knew. That's why she gave me this rosary. Every Tuesday, Rosa lights the 3 in the morning candle, kneels before the altar, and waits, because she knows the Virgin is bringing more afflicted to welcome, that her mission continues. Rosa teaches the women who arrive. When the world abandons, Mary welcomes. When all reject, God chooses. Hope is reborn in every prayer, in every embrace, in every tear of relief. And so Rosa's story became a miracle in motion, a flame that never goes out. If you are passing through a dark valley, if you feel alone and forgotten, make the sign of the cross and repeat with me.